You can take your pick, red or blue. Okay, just got home in our Prius through a check engine light. Pulled the codes and it looks like it is a EGR valve code and a cylinder 4 misfire. Once you get all your panels off, this is the EGR valve, which looks pretty easy. You got a couple bolts here and a few here, and then you can take this off and just replace it, right? No, it's a little bit harder than that. This back bolt here, this one right back in here, it is a pain to get. That nut right there, that nut back there is like no clearance for a ratchet, for a crow's foot, for a socket, anything. So I'm going to show you how to take this thing apart with a shortcut to get this job done a lot quicker. And this is the assembly right here. And once you take those bolts out, you can remove the housing. And there's like a magnet with a bearing on it. And you'll notice it's secure on there. And I don't know if it's just me, but it seems like this assembly unthreads. It could just be me, but once it unthreads, it's just a magnet and some kind of electromagnetic pulse that'll cause this actuator to plunge in and out, allowing exhaust gas to enter into your intake manifold. And the problem is this will be real stiff. It'll stay lodged down sometimes. Sometimes it'll come out and get real firm here. You could spray it with WD-40, but it's not gonna work long term. So we're gonna take this off. This is actually what's throwing your code, this assembly here that gets hung up. You'll need to remove the whole wiper arm assembly, which is these 4 bolts. Fit here, here, there, and slide the bushing out of that housing. Remove this whole assembly, disconnect your plug, take that out of the way, and then you'll see these 10mm bolts in this cowl induction piece of metal. Take all those loose, and that'll release this so that you can have access to the back side of those bolts on this EGR expansion housing. With the wiper arm assembly and the cowl out of the way, you have much greater access to the back side of this. Yeah, you can see there's a 12mm on the top side of this radiator expansion housing or whatever. You'll want to take this 12mm loose. Try and break as many plastic clips and things as possible when you want to take this nut loose off the front side of the EGR assembly. You can take that top bolt loose of this housing, and this is the really hard to get to nut right here on your EGR valve assembly. So this is kind of a cheap way to get this one hard to get to nut loose. Take you a spike like I've got here, come in from the back side into the center,
once it's free,
the center of your nut, like so, and take a pry bar and pry the housing away just enough to where you can spin that nut off. Okay, once you spin it off, you can come down and work it out of there.
No, I don't think it'll go.
No, it probably won't.
Fingers.
Yeah, you'll need to get some micro fingers on there. Yeah, you're on it. Okay, now pull it out. Don't pinch it. Just pull it out. Wiggle it out. Okay, hold on. Don't want to drop it. You drop it, it's gone forever. It goes into the abyss of car parts. Alrighty, now that's a hard one to get to. Now that you've got this one loose and that one loose, this whole assembly is free to move a little bit, you can see. But this stud that it is held in place from is still for venting. We're just going to take this stud out. In order to do that, you're going to need a star E8 socket to fit on the end of that stud. We'll pull that stud out of the head, and this should free up your EGR valve to slide right off. And then you can just crack that loose and start taking the stud out.
There.
Here's the new valve, or new used valve, rather. You take this loose, you can see this assembly is threaded on here. It's like threaded into the bearing housing or something. Not quite sure how it works, but when you unthread it off of that shaft, you can see this new low mileage used one has a whole lot more free play than the last one. That's what you want to see. And put it back together, same in reverse order. You do have to take this airbox assembly out. You've got a couple clips here on the side. Reverse this out of your intake housing. Pull the filter assembly off. And you've got some 10mm bolts down in here that remove all that out of the way. With the airbox out, you're going to notice that hose comes into this plastic housing over top of that tube that runs into your intake manifold. So you have to take these clips off to have access to those two 10mm bolts. On that tube, you've got one on the top, one on the bottom. Take those out and this tube will come free. Once you break those loose, this piece will come loose on your EGR valve, and that'll allow this to slide out of there without having to take the whole radiator chamber assembly out. And you can see down inside that radiator chamber assembly, that whole assembly is just really corroded up in there. It's got a lot of carbon, a lot of soot. You can probably take a wire brush, clean a bunch of this out. And you can spray some brake clean down that, clear it out a little bit. You can see it's like radiator fins. And then pretty much go back with your new valve and reassemble. You'll want to run a pipe cleaner through this thing, clean this out. And these are some kind of grody. When going back together with this valve, you'll need to pry that bracket away, and you won't be able to start this nut unless you back the stud out. So leave the valve pulled away a little bit, reach in there, start your nut by hand, then you can bottom it out flush and finish tightening the nut, and then pull your screwdriver out and go back together with it. Okay, she's all put back together. Got the air filter housing put back on. Got the codes cleared. Went and test drove it. Ran a little bit rough at first, probably from the brake clean, just to clean out. And it stayed clear. Drove it around the block for about a mile or two, and it's good to go. So I think we're fixed. We'll just button up the wiper arm assembly, and we should be back on the road. Thanks for watching, guys and gals.